Siri, follow me.
Sure.
All right, we are almost live. Here we go.
Almost.
Any minute now. Oh, we are live.
Look at that.
We were just live then. All right, let's start. Ready? Hello, Hockey World. It's Thursday, May 3rd, 2018.
I'm Michael Agello, live on location.
I'm Peter Tesse, also live, but not quite at location.
I'm Russ Cohen, still alive.
Yeah, I'm going with that too. I'm alive as well. Kevin Allen, USA Today.
Aren't we all really on location? I'm Mac Lind, and you're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This podcast that comes to you at some point during the day to bring you in the comings and goings in the hockey world. Yesterday we were at 9 a.m. Today we're at 3 p.m. It's all, it's just, whatever it is. It's fine. Yeah, we got so much to get into. We're going to get right into it. And Kevin was just at an interesting thing you were just talking about there. And I kind of is what I wanted to discuss here. What team so far of the 8 teams left just sort of feels like a team that can win it now, that can win it all. And you, what was your answer, Kev?
Well, I mean, I just think it's Winnipeg because, every year there's a team that seems to have it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And the Jets right now just seem like the team that, they have confidence oozing out of every pore. They seem to be able to rise up at the right time. No lead seems to be safe. They have the zany Winnipeg fans that are behind them, so they have the intangibles. And if there was a team that seemed like a team of destiny, it would be the Jets. Now, saying all that, I still believe what I said before this all started, which is, any prognosticator has the danger of going 0-4 in the series because I think either team could win all 4 series. Like, would you be stunned if Boston or Tampa won? No. Would you be stunned if Pittsburgh or Washington won? No, of course not. And the other series to me are the same way. I mean, San Jose, that was a huge win, for them. And, Winnipeg, as much as I think they've been so impressive, I mean, you can't discount the Predators who, are a good team as well. So, it's this second round. I don't know if it was, I can't remember, but I think, were you saying that the first round kind of lacked some pizzazz and whatever they were lacking in the first round, we have it in this round.
I couldn't agree more. The second round has been every bit what you want. Like this is the first time I've honestly felt like, and you always say this, but I really feel like there's 8 teams that could win the Stanley Cup playing.
Yeah.
And that I've never really felt that way. There's always been a couple teams like, well, that would be a real long shot if they won the Stanley Cup. But I don't feel any of these teams are, even Vegas.
Yeah, I still feel Vegas is a long shot, even though I picked Vegas to beat San Jose in this round, and I could have egg on my face if that happens. But actually, it's funny. The team that I would be the most shocked about winning a series is a team that's leading the series 2-1, and that's Washington. Because and that was before the suspension. I still, even though they won, even though Ovechkin scored that goal late in the third period in Game 3, I still, until they prove to me they can slay the dragon, they can step on the Penguins' neck and kill them, I won't believe that they can.
You guys really
I still think Pittsburgh is going to win that series, and actually. Now with the loss of Wilson, it's going to disrupt a lot of things in Washington because their depth isn't great either. So that could be an equalizer. You give Hagelin back to the Penguins. If he makes it in the next game or two, you're talking probably a different outcome.
What I like about Russ and what I miss from being on this show is when Russ talks, he talks with authority. Like I've covered this league 30-some years, and I'm always wondering whether and Russ just comes out and says, the Penguins are going to win this series.
Yeah, I think Russ is nuts. I mean, I'll throw it out. I agree it's authoritative, and both of those guys have been the entire time about the Penguins over the Capitals in the series, and I picked the Capitals. That's part of the reason I think they're just rubbing it in on me. But the Capitals are up, guys. By the way,
it has nothing to do with
the Penguins too.
Yeah. I mean, I think that. I mean, it's possible. Yeah. I mean, the Penguins are a great team. The Caps are a great team, but I don't think the loss of Tom Wilson for 3 games is going to change this series. I don't think that's.
No, I don't think so.
Big effect.
I think it's going to have a big effect too. I agree.
It might have a big effect. But
Tom Wilson's not a third or fourth liner anymore. He's been playing on either the first or second line most of the season, and he's been he's been, for lack of a better term, an assassin out there. He's been physical. He's been going at players, and not having him on the ice, I think, will make some of the Pittsburgh players breathe a little easier because he's a threat.
Yeah,
I think that's true.
No, I mean he is definitely a threat, no questions asked, and I agree with that. And I think that he's and I've liked him as a player, and I think he's playing kind of foolishly but he's being intimidating, right? So he's doing his thing. But before we move on, I want to mention one thing that I tweeted about today, and I just think it's incredible, and it has to be something that hockey fans have to watch, and that is the Brian Burke, Doug McLean Sportsnet Hockey Central at noon.
I listened to it, which
is absolutely the most entertaining thing Sportsnet has had on the air for years. And now, Brian Burke, of course, you just know, like he's just things he says. I mean, the stuff he said already, like talking about Matt Cook. Yeah, I got mad at him one time for drinking too much. And he throws Burke just throws one thing out after another. My favorite quote today is he's talking to David Poile. He's talking about David Poile, and he's like, yeah, Poile's always so nervous. He's like nervous about this. Every time I make a deal with him, he's so nervous. He's like, sit there and you feel like, and he says part of the reason why he gets great deals because you don't want to hurt the guy. He's just nervous. You're like, oh, guys, he's like, oh, and says Poile has been GM of he's been GM for the Predators since Christ was a carpenter, for crying out loud. And he says, now when do you get that? That's my hashtag for today, since Christ was a carpenter. But
that's an old thing.
That's amazing.
That's an old thing.
But Burke's great for that. That's one of his strengths is that he's not afraid to have some fun with the way he sort of describes things and says things, and he's a little blunt, but he's fun that way.
And Doug McLean is also very good with this kind of stuff. And the funny thing is, I would not have taken. I mean, I don't know the relationship, but I would not have taken them as two guys that really got along. Like I wouldn't have said that these are two GMs that I would see getting along. So far they're fine. They're talking about trade they made together, different things like that. But he talked about the media today, and Burke's like, yeah, one GM said to me one time, when you're the best in the world at media, I don't love you. When you're the worst, when you're worst in the world, you can't do anything for me. When you're middle, who cares? He's like, media doesn't matter to me.
I'll just say this, and Russ and I watch Hockey Central often, and some of the panelists on there, this tandem was extremely dynamic and entertaining, and that has been sort of the exception rather than the rule. So more of this, amen, because I want to hear. I want to hear stories. I want to hear inside dope, and and I'm sure a lot of fans do as well.
I want to hear more about Brian Burke, about his being a short order cook. He was a short order cook in college. He told me about it, but he didn't go into great detail about it. I need to know more about that, to be honest.
My favorite Burke story is that he was punished by Lou Lamoriello when he played for Lamoriello at Providence for taking 3 freshmen to midnight mass at Christmas. And so he broke curfew, and Lamoriello ordered that he and the 3 freshmen had to skate at some ungodly hour, like 4:30 in the morning. And they showed up the rink, and Lou was standing there with a cup of coffee waiting for them to get there. And, and bag skated them. So
Kevin,
that's real.
That's awesome.
I have to ask, and we won't spend too much time on it, but it's the first time you've been on the show since the announcement that Brendan Shanahan made on Monday that Lou is not going to be back as general manager of the Leafs. I was a little surprised. I thought he would stick around at least another year, but it appears that Brendan is intent on moving to the next phase of his Shanna plan. What did you think of the announcement, and where do you think that
I was frankly surprised as well. I in talking to Lou, never got that indication that he had one foot out the door, and I don't see Lou Lamoriello as being a good advisor. Like he has to run the show. And I thought Larry Brooks wrote an interesting column this week when he talked about, wouldn't it be, Lamoriello would be a great fit on Long Island, and where his son is now. Saying all that, you hate to see that because the guy is still employed, Gar Snow. Yeah. So, but saying that, if they are going to make a change, I think Lamoriello would be an excellent choice. And I just right away, that first thought is, wow, if you're John Tavares, do you say to yourself, boy, if Lamoriello gets here, that could really be interesting.
It helps. I mean, he's got a history. He's got a history of winning. He goes out and also players love Lou Lamoriello. Like, don't make any mistake.
Oh
about
yeah,
it.
yeah, for sure they do. He's he's down to earth. Contract negotiations often. I've heard several stories of Lou just walking up to the player with a pen and a napkin and writing a figure on it. He goes, "If we start here, can we get this done?" And the player looking at that going, "Yeah," because he's fair. Lou Lamoriello is fair. He doesn't give money away, but he also doesn't penny pinch. That's not his way.
And the famous story of Lou telling Scott Niedermayer that it's probably best for him to go to Anaheim and win a cup. That he could go there and play with his brother and win a cup. And that one of the best players the Devils ever had. He basically said, I think that's probably what's. Of course, I don't want to lose you, but that's probably what's best for you. And that kind of stuff gets around the league. Players.
We heard the other side of that story today on the radio because Brian Burke was saying that that Scott Niedermayer wanted to play in the Western Conference. He wanted to one other thing, and he wanted to play with his brother Rob. And Burke basically said, "Well, I'm the only general manager who can give you all three of those points." So. Yeah. Maybe Lou knew that was the case, and he had done. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure Lou and Brian are tight. I'm sure they knew that was the case, and that's it's great to see him on. If when Brian Burke left, the Calgary Flames, it's like, oh man, it's great to see him as a media person again for a little, even if it's for a little while. Like he said, I'm on a 2-week trial. He said or whatever. It was good to see and he was really true about what he said. One of my favorite things about Burke is that he doesn't take things super personally, but will go nuts if you attack one of his players, and he's always been, and that's definitely. He's lived that. I mean, I think he's lived that to a T. And
where he learned that from was from Pat Quinn.
Yeah, he said that.
And that tandem back in Vancouver before Burke went on to head up the NHL players, player safety, and be the guy. And then when he went to Hartford after that, but it was with Pat Quinn that he learned that kind of that fiery Irish temper. Quinn brought it out in him, and there's some stories out of Vancouver from those days of things that went down. That Burke was just as much front and center, but Pat Quinn got all the press.
Yeah.
Burke is a character. Like when he was an agent, he had just so many rules. Like he was a very mediagenic, but he had rules. Like if you're going to call him at night, you couldn't call him until after 9 o'clock because he wanted to help put his kids to bed. And when he would take clients, like in most cases back then, the players would sort of, pick their agents, and Berkey viewed it the other way around. Like he always had to interview his people before he would take them. And he told me a story. I don't want to mention the guy's name, but the guy wanted to sign with him because his friend was with Burke. And so he called. He goes, I've chosen you as an agent. He goes, well, that's great, but I've decided to reject you. And I said, why? He goes, you didn't have me. And
that's awesome.
The guy said, what? He says, well, because when I told you that you could only spend so much percentage of your signing bonus on a car, you said, well, no, I'm going to get a much nicer car than that. I want to, whatever. And Burke said, you failed, So he didn't take the guy. The guy was a goalie, by the way.
That's just a real quick. What I loved, my quick Burke story really was just how I was very early on doing this, and he sat down and had lunch with me in the Stanley Cup Finals, and one of the the GMs were in town for the meeting or what have you, and he sat down with me for lunch, and he was still the GM of the Ducks, but there was all these rumors going on that he was going to be the GM of the Leafs, and he told me a lot of stuff off the record, and he said and he said, I'm going to trust you with this because obviously, this is a big story. What I'm telling you here, this could really, make your career. He said, this would really make your career. It's a big story, but and he says, if you tell anybody like this, I will kill you in this industry. Like you will be done. I will talk to everybody, and you will be done. And I'm like, okay. So I never said anything. So since then, he's always been super nice to me. Until
it was a test. It was a test.
Oh yeah, but then my last thing about him was the was covering the U.S. Olympics practices in Washington, D.C. and wearing Google glasses, which I had just gotten at the time. And I was trying it out. I figured I'd try it out at a press conference. It's a perfect thing. I can videotape. I can ask people. He goes up to me, comes right up to me and like, what is on your bleeping face? That's what he says to me. Like, right. I'm like, okay, Hi, Brian. This is what this is. Anyway, moving on.
Why don't we start with Boston and Tampa because honestly, this series now is starting to play out like I thought it was going to, because last night was, in my mind, a complete domination by Tampa Bay going into TD Garden. And, as witnessing what Boston did in Boston against Toronto, where the only game that the Leafs won was one that Freddie Anderson, committed robbery, assault, and battery on them. It was systematic. Tampa Bay went in there, took control early, 2 goals by Palat, and shut the Bruins down and won 4-1. And Kevin, I think Tampa Bay now has control of this series.
Yeah, and what's surprising me about this series is, like, going into the series, if you thought there were concerns, one of them would not be in goal. Vasilevsky had an excellent season and Rask played strong. But to me, this has become a goaltending series. Like, I always tend to discount, the reputations of goalies. And, I've often said on this show about, Ed Belfour, they said he couldn't win until he did. And, right. The same is true in Rask. Like, I get it that his record has not been great in, closing out games and stuff. And that, the Boston fan base, is worried that, he can't deliver. But I usually discount that. But in this case, I wonder about that too now. They haven't gotten the big save from Rask when they've needed it in these games that they've lost. And, I sensed that was certainly a factor in yesterday's game as well.
I agree, Kev. I saw Tampa a couple games ago really step it up. And now in this game, like, everything Boston would normally do to a team to try and slow them down, pin them against the board, slew foot them, whatever, they tried to do, they couldn't catch them to do it. And they were just behind the entire game. And so, like, even a change of a lineup, like putting Donato in is going to be great, even though we've all been screaming for that for games now. But I'm not sure that's even enough now. It looks like it's more of they have a couple of defensemen that just can't keep up, and it seems like Tampa's going to victimize them.
Well, one of the things that I thought was going to affect Boston late in the first round series was they were playing Bergeron, Marchand 20 minutes a night. Now I know in a short window you can do that, especially in the playoffs, but the hockey is tough when it comes to the postseason. Playing guys who are normally playing 15 minutes a night, playing them 20 minutes a night, and playing them in tough minutes, it asks a lot. And Chara is playing 26, 27 minutes, and we're talking about a 41-year-old guy here. So I think maybe that's catching up to them. Peter, what do you think of that?
Well, it is, and Boston wasn't completely healthy and everything to begin with. And I think coming into the playoffs and after a 7-game series of the Leafs, they're a little more dinged up. They're tired. And you can lean on your guys all you want, but at a certain point in time, everyone gets tired. And 40-year-old Chara, actually 41, isn't he? Anyways, yeah. You can only lean on him for so long before you have to find a way to hit the pressure relief valve or he's going to collapse. He's not Chara of 2011 anymore. That was 8 years ago. Or
right.
7 years ago.
Yeah.
And, they're a young, fast, deep team, and they're coming in waves. And when they do, you've got to find a way to manage that. And right now, Boston's going back to what's safe and comfortable. And, coaches have trust issues, right? Yeah. They trust players for certain things in certain areas, but you also have to manage your trust with the player's ability. And that doesn't seem to be, or at least it didn't happen last game with Boston.
Well, I mean, and this is the thing that I said early in the series, and I think it's playing out. One of the reasons that Toronto lost to Boston is because there was a lack of pushback on the part of Toronto. Komarov was injured. Yeah. Kadri was out for 3 games. Only guys like Zach Hyman and Roman Polak really pushed back against the Bruins. In this series, you have Yanni Gourde going back at Kevin Miller. I think that, you have McDonough slamming Brad Marchand. There is more fight and I think Tampa is a lot deeper and more experienced than Toronto was. And I think that's what's showing in this series so far.
I think so too. And I'm not yet to the point where I'm going to say that this series is over though, because I feel as if Boston has shown too much resilience to say that, sure. and the next game 4 will be enormous for them.
But a lot of their points is coming from the top line. 48 points in 20 games. It's too many.
No, it is.
Sounds crazy, but it is.
No, and if that line, I mean, we've seen in the NHL, like the way to win in the playoffs is to have 4 lines going, right? And if, you know, the fourth line, you know, often
Or at least 3. You could cut out the 4th line and not get killed.
It feels like winning a Stanley Cup. We're always the Stanley Cup team. We're always talking about the 4th line at some point. Like we're always talking about the Stanley Cup winning team. We're always get into it. Doesn't it feel like that? Like there's always a discussion.
Not a series till we start talking about the 4th line.
Yeah, it is. We do. We do. And at some point, like Burke said today, the reason the Anaheim Ducks won was their 4th line. He won. That's why.
No. He said their third line.
He said line. Okay, sorry, I missed that one. Yeah.
No, it was because you could have Pronger and Niedermeyer on the ice basically all the time. Let's.
Right. I'm not trying to prove you wrong, Act. But the thing was that like Sammy Paulson, Rob Niedermeyer, and Travis Moen. But when the Devils made the Stanley Cup final that year, the one that everybody surprised them, it was that 4th line. It was the Steven Gianta, Steve Bernier line. That was the big
with
key
the Kings,
for them getting.
Kings, it was the 4th line. The Kings winning, it was always the 4th line with the Kings. I mean, it's always like that. So, anyways, I do agree that you have to have, and a top line, one super dominant line. When was the last team that won a Stanley Cup with like one dominant line like the Bruins have? That's
Tampa.
Tampa, probably, yeah. But that was a while ago. I mean, obviously,
a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, they had, but they also, but Brad Richards, was he on that? I can't remember.
He was. Yeah, he was.
Yes.
Richard St. Louis and LeCavier.
Right, so that was a super line.
That was a super line.
Yeah, but you don't see that very often anymore, right? No. So that's yeah. I mean, this is to me. I think
that was the last super line to win a cup before the salary cap went in.
That's right. Well, that's the last line to win a cup.
That's
the last team to win a cup before the salary cap came in, right? So that's the last team that won a cup before the salary cap. So yeah. I mean, I want to switch shift gears a little bit to San Jose and Vegas. It was a great game by San Jose last night, as we all mentioned, but it was the first time that I felt like, that Vegas lost their angel in the outfield. That like for whatever reason they were making mistakes that you would expect a team to make. Dare I say, expect an expansion team to make. Like they were making mistakes, and the Sharks' speed was amazing. I mean, the Sharks.
They made a change a couple of games ago to key up the speed.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about. I mean, and playing Donskoy was really smart because he's obviously super fast, and he scored a goal too. But there were moments when I saw for the first. I mean, I haven't seen maybe Vegas as much as a lot of you guys have, out west. But it was the first time I saw Vegas looking a little lost, a little concerned. Like they were skitterish.
I mean, that happens when a goalie basically doesn't let you get anything. And Martin Jones played out of his mind last night.
Yeah.
He made some incredible saves.
For sure.
There were things that normally I expected were going in and just didn't, simply because Jones was superhuman.
But are we seeing, Kevin, could this be the beginning of the end?
Well, I'm not going that far. Let's see how this kind of plays out. I mean,
it's 2-2.
What's interesting is that series to me, it is Vegas' speed, and San Jose is not all that fast, or at least not as fast as Vegas. But they do have a lot of skilled players.
Yeah,
and their defense has been underrated for a while. And Martin Jones, I agree.
Yeah,
is not given nearly enough credit for the impact he has as well. So, I feel like exactly the same way as I did before the series started. It could go either way, but I'm not I like how you phrased that they lost their angel in the outfield. But I'm not ready to say that I think he just left for a game.
What San Jose really did well was the way they were pressuring the puck. They for a change, Vegas couldn't breathe. And that was a big deal. Actually, Vegas got gassed a few times because San Jose, besides adding a little speed, do have bigger players. That was an issue, and they finally got Fleury moving. Fleury, this is the most Fleury had to move to try and stop shots in maybe the entire playoffs. So that was another big thing too.
So Russ, that's a really good point, because when San Jose started moving, they closed the gaps down on the battles and puck retrieval at times. And then what Vegas had to deal with was, now I've got to go up and battle against Kane. I got to battle against Pavelski. I got to battle against Burns.
Yeah,
that's tiring. And Vegas has had a lot of success because you're not catching them.
Yeah.
Well,
speaking
of tiring, and San Jose definitely benefited from the quick out, getting the sweep in round one. But you're playing Burns and you're playing Vlasic, 28 to 30 minutes a night, that is going to take a toll. Now, not that Vegas is really pounding on them, but just being out there that much in a playoff setting it could take a toll when it gets to a sixth or seventh game. And that, I mean, to my mind, that's the direction this is going. I thought it was going to go 7, and I have no reason to think it's not.
Yeah, no, I to me, what it was more than San Jose, playing as skating with Vegas and trying to step with their speed. San Jose was playing fast. Like they were there when they were getting the puck, they were moving it quickly. Everything they were doing was quick. It was playing quicker more than it was their foot speed that I really noticed. Like they really didn't give any time, and you have to play fast to beat Vegas. I mean, that's honestly what it's obvious. You have to, if you play fast, you can get to the slightly maybe lesser skills of some of those players because you're playing so quickly.
Yeah. The hallmark of Vegas is the ferocious, quick forecheck. If they get on your defense, they make you cough it up. And I mean, if the only way is to quickly extricate yourself out of the defensive zone, then you have to do that. Otherwise, you're going to give them early opportunities, and they're going to score early.
Yeah, totally. And that's what we saw.
Vegas was 0 for 5 on the power play, and they've been really good on the power play.
Yeah,
right.
No, and that was huge. I mean, it made me think that San Jose has a legitimate shot at this. And for the first time in the playoffs, I felt like, oh, maybe Vegas can actually lose 4 games out of 7. I just feel like because before that, it didn't feel like it was possible.
I think DeBoer is figuring them out each game. I do.
That also is a big thing. I think DeBoer, you have to have good coaching.
He's one of those very smart coaches, X's and O's wise, and does figure things out.
Yeah.
Now, Kevin, I wanted to ask you this because I frankly was a little surprised that the NHL gave Tom Wilson 3 games. I believe he deserved to be suspended for the Dumoulin hit in Game 2 because that was a clear elbow to the head, but they didn't suspend him. And I almost think this is sort of like cumulative justice, retroactive justice. He knocked out Wenberg, he knocked out Dumoulin, he breaks Aston Reese's jaw. It's like, okay, that one actually, the funny thing was probably the most borderline of the 3. And I think all those things were taken into account, plus the laughing on the bench. What did you think of the suspension?
Well, to me, I took a bigger perspective about it. Basically, the length I felt was probably fair because nobody was happy. The people who wanted the book thrown at them wanted 5 games or more, or to be gone for the series and so forth. And there were former players I saw just on Twitter, Jeremy Roenick, Mike Commodore. There were some others that aren't coming to mind who thought it was a clean hit. And thought it was an acceptable hit. So nobody was happy with the decision. So it was probably a fair one. Isn't that the definition of a good compromise when everyone's unhappy? But here's my take on it and what I don't like about it. What they got him on here really could be called a technicality. Basically he changed his angle of attack and he had time to not do that. He wasn't committed to the hit. Therefore, you could then hold him responsible because, on the other criteria, he was seen. That was a head-on shot. The player was not defenseless. He had time to react. So on all the elements, he was okay. So what they basically said in the video is that he adjusted himself in order to get on the inside shoulder and then drive upward and making the head the contact. So here's my problem with all that and what I think needs to be done now. Since none of us everyone looks at these things and nobody sees the same thing, are we not getting to the point that we see that players are operating now and living in the gray area? They know where that area is, where we can go and maybe we're okay, maybe not. And so because that's how they earn their living, they're living in that gray area. I think we got to remove the gray area. I think it's time now to say, just like we do with sticks, a head blow is a head blow. It's a minor penalty. If it's a hockey play gone bad, or you intended it or you didn't intend it, it's a 2-minute penalty. And if it's severe, the referee has the discretion to make it 5, a major, and a game misconduct. Okay. And I think that would help. The players adjust. Pardon me?
Treat it like a high stick.
Yeah, just like the sticking, where you're held responsible for your actions, intentional or not.
Yeah, I like that's bang on.
Take the gray area out. It is a penalty. We know it's a penalty, and I think the players will adjust. And I know the argument is that we're going to take hitting out of the game, but let me ask you this: if that rule was in place, would Wilson have hit him head on like a Mack truck and ran him over by driving through his core, as they like to call it? So
no.
Absolutely. Here's the thing, though, Carter.
Here's the other frustrating part. Sorry, Peter. The other frustrating part is this happened after the fact, but during the game, there's no penalty.
Yeah, well, that's why I think we need to get that rule in that it is a penalty, because what they deemed it is that he met all the criteria for that to be a clean hit.
Yeah.
You know, and that's because he had the gray area. He took advantage of the gray area.
Yeah.
He could be seen. The player wasn't defenseless. And I think we just got to eliminate the gray area.
Yeah.
Kevin, you're bang on. And the other thing is there's way more hits going on that are fantastic and clean, just as much that have nothing to do with the head.
Yeah.
And there's guys who can do it really well, and they do it well.
Peter, I'll give you an example. In the Minnesota-Winnipeg series, when Bufflin cartwheeled Mikko Koivu, there was nothing dirty about that check. It was just a big Mack truck of a guy like Bufflin hitting a smaller guy, hitting him clean and hitting him hard. I mean, Bufflin, I wouldn't want to be on the ice when Bufflin's on the ice. He would destroy, and he can destroy anybody.
Not the way he's playing right now.
And that's the other thing that makes it feel like Winnipeg, to me, like feels like Winnipeg's going to do this, because it's like they have these stories already developing that you always follow.
Yeah, like I'm not buying into that.
Like the Bufflin taking out 2 Predators, with 1 in each arm. That play is just is already so legendary of these playoffs. It's just it's crazy.
Yeah.
There's still stories to be written, Nick. I'm not going there yet.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I have a lot of respect for Winnipeg. I like the constitution of the team. Russ has been a big Hellebuck backer, and I have been as well. I mean, I like their team a lot. I just think that Nashville now. There have been some players that I think have underachieved, and we talked about it yesterday, with Turris not playing up to snuff. But I think Nashville is right there too. And if they bounce back in Game 4, this is it's a best of 3 with Nashville having home ice advantage.
The risk, though, they're putting Scott Hartnell in, and either Scott Hartnell will make things great for Nashville, or he'll be in the box and make things horrible for Nashville.
I was going to bring that up, but let me hit you with some information about this series. So Hartnell's in. Apparently, Yannick Weber might be in too. So you're putting in a guy who hasn't played since March 24th. You're bringing in Hartnell because Fiala only played 12 minutes on the game on Tuesday. Yeah. And it's believed that he might be injured, but he stayed out after practice and did some extra work. Hartnell was in. And I'm wondering, I just put my blog up and I said this. I wonder if Laviolette is talking to his players, particularly after what Subban said post-game, where he almost – which was so rare for Subban. I'm sorry I wasn't able to join you guys yesterday just due to timing, but it was such a rare comment to see Subban sort of be a little frustrated, a little off his game, to say, like, he almost questioned if he was getting the short end of the stick. And maybe he is. I don't have a problem with his comments. It's just it was so rare for him. But I'll give you one. Go ahead.
Who is Weber potentially replacing? Matt Irwin, or is it
no, Emelin?
Emelin. Okay, wow. Yeah. That's a now. Emelin's mobility was bad when he was in Montreal, and the one thing we haven't seen from him, we haven't seen his usual cheap shottedness.
Yeah.
So and usually that's the only way he's a factor in a series is when he's undercutting somebody. So maybe they think,
Yeah, those guys, Emelin and Irwin, have only been getting just over 10 minutes a night. So I want to give you a little information, details here. The top 4 skaters. Sorry, I'm gonna pull this up. I got it right here. The top 4 skaters by ice time for the Predators are Subban, Yossi, Ellis, and Ekholm. They're top 4D. I just put this in the blog. You know how many goals they have between them? 3.
Yeah.
They have It's right here. They have 3 goals and 19 total points between those 4, but 12 of those points are secondary assists. The Jets defense, 8 goals, 20 points, and only 7 secondary assists.
Well, to be fair, I think Ellis is extremely beat up, so I don't think we're going to see any offense out of him. But
I'm just saying. But if you're going to rely on those guys, you're going to run them that hard, like they're averaging a lot of ice time, and now you're taking out one of your guys you need to score, which is Fiala, who's a great player. You're putting a little more pressure back on them, and this is it's going to be a very interesting game for that reason.
We're trying to rely on somebody from the past, Peter, and Hartnell that he used to be able to rely on, and he thinks that'll create a problem for Winnipeg, and he could, but he also could be in the box in like 2 minutes into the game with a dumb stick penalty. Like that's
just remember, Nashville unraveled at the end of the last game.
Yeah,
like Rennie unraveled. Now, Paul McCann had a great thing in his piece today, saying Rennie's a leader on this team, and that slash, and it was rinky dink, like it was a bad swing of a stick, but they had to call it because it was right in front of them, and it was a goalie whipping it across the guy's back, but it was flat. It didn't do anything. But Paul's point was that wasn't for the Jets. That was for his team. And I think there's some merit to that idea that he was sending a message to the team, like, you guys, let's get it together here.
Yeah. Russ, I was waiting for the Harry Zollnerchuk reference.
I decided not to go there because he's going Hartnell now. So it's a little more viable than Harry Zollnerchuk, I think.
All right. So we've been doing this thing called X Addict, which is something we've had some fun. We had the WHA yearbook from 1970. 74, I think it was.
Yeah.
So now today I've got something that I was going to use last week when we had Kevin on, and I forgot to use it during the show. So I found this online, and these are for sale. You can buy these for $120. You probably have some of these, Kevin, sitting around your house. You might want to sell them. All right. So here we go. This is this apparently back in the day was how you got into the games as a media person. Is this the case? Like, these are buttons. And I don't know if these are credential buttons, but they look like they're credential buttons. Like
I've never seen those. That doesn't mean
they're a little bit. I mean, there are like 76, 76, 72.
Yeah, that would be just a little bit before my time.
Yeah, this looks like an internet scam to me, Ak. It really does. I'm paying 100.
With baseball, Mike, I've seen like stuff from the 20s where they did have those media pins, and that did get into a game. So.
It says here these buttons were handed out to members of the media press at various events. Yeah. This group of pinback buttons came from a press photographer.
Yeah, I think those are just buttons they gave away, but I don't think those are credentials. Because we did that too in the early years of the Professional Hockey Writers Association. For the Stanley Cup final, we gave away, all the members of the media would get a little pin that had this replica Stanley Cup on it. So
this feels like the button that you would wear on your like fedora, like old fashioned media.
Don't you remember the old movies? They used to have like the little media like piece of paper that you would stick in the brim of the hat. That whole thing.
Yeah. Well, $120 for these 7.
Yeah.
Does seem a little pricey, but I'm just
yeah.
Does to me too. I'll tell you an interesting story. I ran into Mike Emmerich in Pittsburgh, and he and I were talking, and he had taken a photo in Boston of an NBA game that they had there from the 1970s, and the action was going on, and he goes, "Look at the crowd, and do you notice anything there?" And I looked at the crowd, and then before I had a chance to analyze it, he said, "Everybody there is watching the game. Nobody, the cell phones weren't. They were all watching the action." Certainly not true. And today is
that's a rarity now.
Oh, I know. And it's so crazy true. And I felt like when I went to a game this year with my daughter just to sit in the stands, I pulled out my cell phone, and I haven't sat in the stands in a game in like 10 years. I felt weird about pulling my cell phone out in the stands because it did occur to me that this is something that I never would have done. It actually did cross my mind that this is a rude thing, a weird, I don't know. It's a very, very strange
everybody
thing.
Does it now. As a guy that crowd watches up in the press box, you look down and I would say half the people have their phones out.
Oh,
and
yeah.
are checking them.
So there is some breaking news here.
Yeah, what's going on here?
Peter did bring it to my attention, and I looked at it. Elliot Friedman's reporting that there's a possible trade in the works between Carolina and Arizona for Marcus Kruger, and he doesn't know all the details, but could be happening.
That's a salary dump. I think Kruger's salary was $3.1 million, and didn't he get placed on waivers, Russ? I think he got placed on waivers at some point during the year.
I thought.
Yeah. So that you know what that is? I'm sure I can't look at Cap Central right now, but I'm pretty sure that Kruger's cap hits 3.1 and his money being paid out is significantly less. And if that's the case, that's the typical Arizona move of having to pay a player. It helps them with the cap hit, and they don't have to pay out the money.
But it's also a Rick Dudley move, getting back somebody that he drafted for nothing.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we would think that this is you think Kevin Dudley or Waddell is calling the shots on something like this?
Well, I don't think it matters. I think they're been together before, and I think they work kind of in tandem, like whose idea it was. But I agree. I mean, this makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Now, Kevin, I have a lot of respect for Rick Dudley. He's a great talent evaluator. I've run into him a lot in Toronto. He's a great guy. And I think it was a good move for Carolina to do what they did, because he can step right in. He's been an assistant GM in Montreal, so he's up to speed. But I'm a little concerned. I mean, there's this GM search. It goes off, it goes on, it goes off again, and now we're hearing Don Waddell is a candidate, which means there is not going to be a GM search, or probably isn't going to be one. I mean, the chaos continues.
I don't think it's decided yet. I think they've got this option. They could continue the way they are now, or I think they're still sort of looking at some of the young possibilities to bring in. And it's not going to be a veteran guy. We know that. Not with Dudley being brought in and so forth. And I think the reason Dudley came is he has a comfort factor, obviously working with Waddell, and I'm sure Waddell has kind of sold him. And the one thing I always caution people on, and it's so true in our league, I think more so than other leagues, and that is that we are fearful of change. And if it's not the same as we've been doing it, we think it's wrong. Yeah. And so I just say, hey, let's be a little open-minded and see kind of what happens in this situation.
Yeah, I think that we have no choice, first of all, right? But I think that at the same time, it is, and I remember when the Islanders did the whole team GM by team by committee type thing. And man, sorry, crazy sounds going on here. But I remember when the Islanders did it, and remember how people went nuts. Like, it was like absolutely. Right. Oh, I mean, it was, and now like half the league teams in the league do it that way. I mean, they might not call it that, but they do it that way. Mm-hmm. They have this group, and they're very cautious. But very, very few places do you have like the old school of like the owner like going to the GM and then the president of the team saying, well, whatever you think is best, I will go. They're all completely talking to each other all the time about things now, and they're communicating, which makes sense. I mean, you shouldn't just put all your faith into one person necessarily. I think so. I think that I thought this was I thought this was a perfect thing for Carolina to bring in Duds. I thought that was a perfect, if you could get one guy who could fill this spot, and fill an ambiguous type spot, it would be Rick Dudley. He goes in there, he can do whatever he has to do.
And Dudley can do what he has always done. I mean, he was AGM in Montreal, and he was, doing his scouting, and I think he lives in Buffalo. He was going up to Toronto and covering a lot of AHL games, going to junior games. He probably can do that as VP of hockey operations with the Hurricanes. And I think this is I think it's the first trade made during the playoffs since the infamous Jared McCann for Eric Branson deal a couple years ago. And like I said, if you don't think Kruger can help you, and you want to alleviate some of your cap concerns, and we know Carolina probably is going to be, they're probably going to be a budget team. Then if you can get rid of them for Jordan Martinook, who's I think a borderline NHLer, then so much better.
Yeah. I mean, it feels a little bit like an NBA move to me, but yeah, I think it's, which is what we're going to see a little bit more of in the offseason, right? So, and a lot of people are, will text me right away on Twitter and stuff like that when this happens. They're like, I thought the trade deadline was passed, and you can't make, the fact of the matter is, you can make trades. You can always make trades. You can't play guys after the trade deadline. You can make a trade the day after the trade deadline. You just can't play them in the playoffs, right? So that's the issue. So you can make trades all throughout the summer. It is advantageous to teams. And part of what, because someone I was talking to the other day talked about, okay, if Tavares was a sign or Erik Karlsson was a sign and trade type situation, teams that are involved now would have potentially a little head start on that. And it is true. I mean, they could,
like agents don't want the sign and trade. That's why it's not happening. That's my guess on that.
But everybody, LeBron and I'm not,
but the agents are in charge of that. Not.
No, I know. But there was a time, and Kevin used to pick on me all the time about this, about the three-way trades, then suddenly they started happening.
But I think it's funny. I think the 1 year max deal, I think the sign and trade deal, I think they sound great in theory.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether
our favorite time of day.
It's 4 o'clock.
No, I agree with you. I think the sign and trade is good in theory.
Right, but
LeBron, people like Pierre LeBron and Elliot Friedman are out there saying that John Carlson. I'd like to do this with a musical background. That John Carlson is, of course, everybody seems to think John Carlson is going to be a sign and trade.
Right. Well, it's one of those. It's one of those things that when it happens, okay, I'll believe it. But until it does, I mean, a reporter that I respect greatly, Chris Johnston from Sportsnet, was saying something regarding, John Tavares going to, the possibility of Tavares going to Toronto on a 1 year max deal for, $15 million as something that was a possibility. It'll be a possibility when it happens. Until then, I mean, what's the last time we saw that? Solani in Korea going for 1 year to Colorado, and it wasn't even a max deal. That doesn't happen anymore. All the risk is on the player.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, and
too much at stake now.
It's perfectly fine to be cynical like that, Mike. I understand.
There's too much at stake. I mean, you aren't. I mean, you might see it for an Ilya Kovalchuk, but you're not going to see it for guys in their prime. It's not going to happen.
No, there is too much at stake. That's well put.
There's always a lot. There's always a lot at stake. As I've heard this expression before. And it's very true. There's always a lot at stake, and I do agree. I feel as if the Islanders are going to have to do something to save face here in some way, shape, or form. They aren't just going to let Tavares walk away, right? I mean, they're not going to
drafting rights that they know he's not
going to rights. But what are you going to get? What can you legitimately get for John Tavares' rights at this point?
You might be able to get a conditional first for 2019. You might be able to get a lower first round pick, depending.
I don't think so. I think it's second or third.
They can get him. They can keep him off the market. You might be able to get a lower first round pick.
I mean, it gives somebody the chance to talk to ahead of time. What does that really mean?
You got to run, guys.
Okay, thanks, Ken. See you later. Thank you. Thanks so much.
If you're gonna take that
Toronto
risk,
wants him, and Detroit wants him, and I'm the Rangers, and I think I can get him, I might give my second.
And let's be honest. The back channels are going to be working overdrive on this.
Oh, they already are, man. Right? I mean,
and the back and you guys know more about that side of how that works and the nuances and the getting around stuff. But if there's a player who knows Tavares, or there's someone who knows Tavares, all that stuff's in full force. So yeah, you're going to spend that pick,
right?
Because you've got a pretty good idea, and you want to make sure you sew it up. And Correct. It says to Tavares, "Hey, we really want you."
Yep.
Now, in a situation,
first round pick, not anything, 15 or above.
No,
right.
No.
And we're talking about a superstar, a franchise cornerstone in Tavares. I mean, I don't think it's hyperbole to say that probably the second most valuable forward in this free agent class is Van Riemsdyk. And if the Leafs sell his rights before that 5-day window, they're probably at best getting a third-round pick. They're not getting some sort of bevy of return for him. I mean, the time to trade him was last summer or at the deadline, and now you're only getting a pittance, and that's really not worth it.
That's why I think for Tavares, you could get the conditional 2019 first-rounder, because if a team does negotiate with Tavares and they are the team that signs him, they won't care about giving up that first-round pick the next year.
Right.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. So, All right, so let's do a little bit of rumor charting for now before we get out of here today. So I launched a rumor chart last night. Like I said, I mean, I usually have a couple hundred pages of notes before I launch the initial rumor chart. This year I've had over 600 pages of notes. It's just, I mean, my wife was saying, if you paid this much attention, to your schoolwork in college, you would have been, summa cum laude. Like,
you wouldn't have been a hockey blogger.
I know. I could have grown up to be a hockey blogger. But an anonymous hockey blogger to be actually. So anyway, so here we go. Let's talk a little bit of the rumor chart. And this year this is going to be a great summer for rumor people. I mean, this is the summer that's going to reinvigorate your belief and faith in the fact that teams talk to each other all the time. So let's go with the first three names, because the first name's automatically for anybody, and then the rest of the chart is for subscribers, and we really appreciate it. It does keep us going. The $20 a month $20 a year means a ton to us. So thanks for those who subscribe to the rumor chart.
Yeah, and I think you can clear out that 3,184 messages in an afternoon.
Yeah, that comes every day. Every day I get that. So I will. I'll try to go through them later tonight, Mike. Anyway, moving on. Patrick Maroon, the Oilers. We all still believe, and a lot of people I talk to still believe that he's going to return to the Oilers, and that this was the plan the whole time. So, and that he really likes playing. Connor McDavid really likes him more than anything else. So I think this is still the place to beat, obviously, and I have him on there at 60%. I have heard a little bit of Arizona making a push, but I think and actually the Flyers, which was kind of surprising. Patrick Maroon was a Flyer, so. Mm-hmm. They always do tend to have a more of a look at players.
This one's a long shot for the Flyers.
It's definitely a long shot. It would require something else to happen, I think, in order for this to happen.
One of the places that was supposedly interested in him at the deadline, but then they slumped badly and ended up trading Paul Stastny, was St. Louis, because I believe he's from the St. Louis area. So maybe that's worth a 5 to 10% on the rumor chart, because it's possible they're looking. They're going to be looking probably to bolster up front, because I think they're a little weak up there, depending on whether guys like Fabry come back, or they had a bunch of injuries up there. But yeah, I mean, more than likely he's going back to Edmonton. I mean, that's everybody's been saying that, so I would be shocked if he didn't.
Yeah, I think that's where it's heading to. Tavares, this is a moving target, of course. I'm still holding out faith from people I talk to that the Islanders are still the favorite in this, and that they still will make a last-minute big push, whether or not, and Tavares will have to decide whether or not that 8th year is worth it to him, basically. That's what it's going to come down to, I think. And and whether or not he wants to go with the direction, and whether, if maybe we see Lou Lamoriello, maybe we see something like Kevin talked about, maybe we see that possibility happening, that could change the dynamic on the island pretty quickly. He does. Yeah. He is happier this year. I mean, if it was last year, I think it would have been worse. This year, he did have some line mates that he played with that he liked. There are some definitely people, though, that really around him that seem to think more than ever that he is going to be, going to Toronto.
Really frustrated this year, so I don't think so.
Yeah, I honestly, the team imploded. So he may like his line mates, but they haven't solved their goaltending problem. Their defense has been, problematic because of injuries and inconsistency. I know, great. They re-signed Josh Bailey, and they have some good youngsters, but I don't think they're a rudderless ship, the Islanders, and maybe Lamoriello helps out with that. But he's not a magic man, and you bring him in, and now all of a sudden it's not going to change the direction of the franchise, especially if Garth Snow is staying around, which that's the indicator, is that if Lou goes there, it might be his team president, and Garth stays as general manager. I mean, they'll still have billboards trying to get him out of there.
Right. Oh yeah.
And I don't.
If you're Tavares and his agent, you've got to be having some really honest conversations about what's best for John Tavares, and if you've got 5 teams, let's just use 5 as a number, that are offering something, and then you have the Islanders.
Yeah.
How do you, in good faith, and let's look at the 5 you have up there, Ek.
Yeah.
Detroit, Toronto, New Jersey, the Rangers, or Buffalo.
Yeah.
I have more faith in those 5 than I do in what Garth Snow is doing right now, long-term for John Tavares.
Yeah.
And if that's what this is, a long-term deal that is the last huge strike of his career,
right,
you're going to whittle down to find a way to make it work with either the Leafs, the Devils, or the Rangers, because that's your best chance for your legacy as a player.
Well, this is the interesting thing, because I just as much as I was convinced that Stamkos was heading to Toronto, I am convinced that Tavares is not. But one thing that I have heard is that Tavares and Austin Matthews have the same representation. And if you go down the road of saying we're in on Tavares, then I think the Leafs have to be negotiating with the representative for both players to say, okay, we want to put them both on this team. Let's negotiate for both of them, because if you sign Matthews for $11 million, Tavares is not taking anything less than $11 million.
And that's why, I'm not sure that deal could happen. That's the thing,
Yeah.
It's going to be hard.
But you could if you move out other guys.
Yeah, no, it
That's
could.
the thing. If that deal happens, then, Nylander and or Marner, one or two of them, or Kapanen, two of the three will have to go at some point.
Here's the thing, though, that you have to remember, Peter. It's like that there is something. I mean, you can sit there and we can all say the Islanders have the least amount of future, or they're disorganized right now, or all this stuff's going on. There's something that happens to a player once they play for a team, that they don't love change.
There's a name for that, Eck.
Yeah,
it's called Sundinitis.
Yeah, no, but it happens to everybody. I mean, it's like every time, because how many times have you seen this? I mean, so many times you've seen players who stay with teams throughout the career, and you think to yourself, man, if I was that player, I would want to, and they never win or whatever. They don't get.
Nobody does it recently. That was a while ago.
No, I still think it happens. I really do, because
it doesn't happen anymore. I don't.
What was the last player to jump ship? I mean, name a top player who's jumped ship, and you can't name
Eric
one.
Stahl jumped ship. A lot of players jumped ship.
Well, Eric Stahl, he was told to go. I mean, basically, he was told.
Oh, okay.
No, he
Ryan
was.
Suter.
I mean, Eric Stahl was told he wasn't going to be brought back.
Ryan Suter, Parise.
I'll give you that. I mean, it does happen, but
it happens all the time.
Yeah, it happens, but there is also something that, Tavares has been the voice of this team since he got there, right? He has been the man.
Have you heard him lately?
No,
right.
I agree with you, but I'm not saying. Listen, I mean, I might be totally wrong, and I'm tight with some of Tavares's best friends in Toronto, and they flat out tell me that he's going there, that they're working on it. They're working on it all the time. They joke about it. I get these crazy fun texts. They really believe that this is going to be I don't know if he's going there or not. I know he wants to play there. I don't know. I think he's played it down how much he wants to play there based on what they say.
I hope you're right, Eck, but I honestly, it's like, I mean, we did hear the same things about Stamkos. We heard friends, his father, his friends.
It was very different. I mean, because Stamkos, they're different kind of people. Like Stamkos was the kind of guy who wanted to really stay out of the limelight and loved the obscurity of Tampa. And I always got the sense that if it was close enough, he knew that going from the obscurity of Tampa, which really is like, very little media covering you, and you can pretty much walk around, to the fact, like, even when he traveled to Toronto for a game, he couldn't even go to dinner. I mean, he was really up. I mean, Stamkos was a different kind of character than Tavares. Tavares has already been a star in a starry market like New York.
You know what, the tax law saved Steve Stamkos, not.
Well, that's also.
But also, the Islanders are a better organization.
I don't think it's all that. I don't know.
Brooklyn. Then the Islanders,
a big deal. Yeah, it
is nicer than Brooklyn.
Yeah, no, it is. It is a big deal. But then the new stadium's coming, and
is it? They haven't even broken ground. Like, there's questions about this now.
We're
talking. And we've had this conversation a number of times about the stadium and what it's going to mean. And I hope for the fans there it happens. Like, I mean, that's a great.
Yeah, nobody believes it's even happening now until the ground is broken.
That's not something you base your contract future around. Is a stadium.
Best case scenario, Tavares will be playing in that new arena at age 31, which in the NHL today is where most players are considered over the hill.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the one thing I think is minimized by all this. Let me stay with the franchise that drafted me first overall. If somebody has the motivation to want to win a Stanley Cup, and you're John Tavares, you don't stay with the Islanders, because right now it doesn't seem like they have a plan to win a Stanley Cup. And that's the thing. Maybe a team like New Jersey with a lot of youngsters and on an upward track, maybe the Rangers with the money and the might that they have, maybe Toronto, and there are a number of teams, but I can't make that argument with the Islanders because they continue to just fumble around like a rudderless ship.
He's made the playoffs twice. I mean, at the end of the day, he does want to win. That's one thing that is built into him that he has talked about, and it's not happening.
Right.
Yeah. All right. I mean, I'll go with you on that. I mean, and the final one I had on there, which I still did I move? Oh shoot, I closed out. Was
Mike Hoffman.
Mike Hoffman, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
I'll bring it back up for you guys. It is interesting, and I think that Hoffman, we've heard his name on and off. And I was always thinking, why would they trade Mike Hoffman? That was always in my head, but apparently they might.
I think he's got 2 years left in his contract.
That's why.
Mark Stone is up. He's an RFA, so you can probably have both of them. And this is Eugene Melnick we're talking about, so he can't pay both guys. He's going to pay one of them.
Right.
And that's probably why, Stone is the big-bodied winger. Yeah. Hoffman's small and quick, and probably they're thinking, okay, well, one guy could last longer, another guy, they have to make a talent evaluation on that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They bring
but I think they would keep Stone first. I agree with that.
I think that Stone has a lot of little intangibles he does that people really like.
Yeah.
Like isn't he one of the top takeaway guys in the NHL over the last 5 years?
He's also carried himself really well in playoff games when he's been in it, like point wise, and that's another thing.
No, he really has. So Mike Hoffman here, the Blues are an interesting team to watch this summer because they really have. They are coming off,
their goaltending. They really do. I mean,
no, they do. But there's only so much you can do with that situation, and I think that they will make a move. And they will try to address it. But at the same time, they also their scoring did let them down. Also, it really did. And Tarasenko is an interesting case because Tarasenko, he's not going anywhere. But if you talk to a diehard St. Louis Blues fan, Tarasenko is in the doghouse. Like he really. He really is.
One thing that we heard near the deadline was that, a guy like Robbie Fabry, who's had 2 major injuries in his career, that maybe the patience with the Blues organization has run out. That they, they just don't think he's going to be able to be durable enough. And he's a really good talent, so I wouldn't give up on him for nothing. But I mean, Russ would know the bevy of young talent that they have in Thomas and Jordan Kyrou. They have young guys coming up who will be on their entry level deals and cheap. And if they have those guys, they can afford to spend $5 million on a player like Hoffman if they make a trade.
They could.
Yeah. I agree with that.
The guy that's killing St. Louis is Steen. They've got 5.75 tied up in him for 3 more years, and he's 34 years old. He's not the guy he once was when he signed that deal. That was a tactical error.
Well, neither is J-Bo. I mean, J-Bo's another one.
Well, he hasn't been the same since he left Florida.
Right.
So
and
let's not. I mean, yeah.
And there's a situation where a team that's looking for a veteran defenseman, and I don't know, I'm not looking at Cap Central again, but I think Bouwmeester has a year or 2 left in the current contract. 1 year. That might be a Toronto scenario where we want to add a defenseman, but we're not gonna
for him to go though, Mike. He is an introvert.
Yeah. Right, I agree.
But
he's an odd duck, man.
Yeah, he could have a hard time in that market. That's the only problem with that.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Well, there's more to check out on the Rumor Chart, of course, and we love it. We thank so much for all of you guys supporting it. So many of you guys have joined up already in the last 2 days. It really does help. It helps pay the writers. You put it into PayPal, we pay them out from PayPal. It's the direct correlation, guys. It goes right to them. And remember to anything you can do there. If you also want to support the podcast, which a couple of you have in the last couple of days, we really appreciate it. We haven't advertised as much because it's been crazy, but we're going to be doing some more things soon, and it'll make it kind of interesting. And if you've ever subscribed, if you ever were a patron of us before on Patreon, and maybe you left, I'm still gonna have things that I'm going to give you guys who left because we really appreciate all the stuff that you've done. So maybe you'll come back, maybe you don't. It's up to you, but we really appreciate it. If you go to patreon.com/hockey. And you can if you can do $5 a month, or if you can do $1 a month, or if you can do whatever you can do, if all of you guys did just a little bit, we'd be able to do the show no problem and continue it for a long time. So we appreciate that too. And anything you can do there helps out. So patreon.com/hockey.
We have to mention before the end of the show, the passing of Bill Torrey, the former Islanders, and I believe he was GM of the Florida Panthers as well. I know he was team president for a while, but I mean, if anybody wants to look at a blueprint of how to build a dynasty, look at Bill Torrey's drafting record from 1972 to when the Islanders won their first cup in 1979 or 1979-80. I tweeted it out. I mean, Denny Potvin, Trottier and Gillies, Bossy, Tonelli. I mean, it was like one or two guys from that team every year. And that team dominated for 4 straight years. It was a fantastic.
You're going to make me vomit, Mike, because I had to learn the hard way as a Ranger fan living on Long Island before the Islanders came in a year before, and then they came in and living 20 minutes from the Coliseum and watching all those championships and reading about those guys in Newsday. Yeah. I hated the Islanders and their players, but I had great respect for guys like Torrey and Al Arbor because what they did was just amazing. And it's just you don't get guys like that anymore. You just don't. But the league has changed too. It's hard to be that way too.
Yeah, it really has.
Yeah, but he did have success in Florida as well, because I believe he was he was president of that organization when they got to the Cup final when they played Colorado. So he didn't lose his touch.
But he didn't lose his touch. But I mean, he did it in a not in a cap era. In a cap era, it's so much different.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys, that's all the time we have for today. We appreciate it. Enjoy the games tonight. It's going to be fun ones. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. We will talk to you tomorrow.